They say time heals all wounds, but some wounds don't heal, they just burrow deeper, becoming scars that remind you every day of what was taken from you. Standing outside Caroline Blackwood's pristine suburban home in my sharp lawyer's suit, I slipped an envelope through the mail slot. Not legal papers, not yet. Just an old photograph of a gaunt little girl with hollow eyes standing next to a woman with a fake smile. That little girl was me. That woman was my Aunt Caroline. And after 18 years of silence, it was time to have a conversation. My name is Amelia Vance, though everyone calls me Amy. I'm 26 now, a practicing attorney who specializes in protecting victims of financial exploitation, particularly children who've been betrayed by their guardians. It's ironic. Really, my career was born from my own childhood trauma, a way to ensure no other child would suffer what I did. But before I could save others, I had to save myself. And that meant confronting the woman who had systematically destroyed my childhood while enriching herself in the process. 18 years ago, I lost my mother to cancer. I was 8 years old, scared, and completely alone. My father had left when I was a baby, something Caroline never let me forget. When child services needed to place me somewhere, Caroline stepped forward like a saint, claiming she wanted to honor her sister's memory by raising me as her own. The court praised her generosity. The social workers called it a blessing. Everyone believed Caroline Blackwood was my savior. What they didn't know was that caring for me came with substantial financial benefits. Over the years, Caroline received approximately $280,000 in various forms of assistance: survivor benefits, state aid, federal grants, and education funds specifically designated for my care and future, money that was supposed to ensure I had everything I needed to thrive, money that I never saw a penny of. Instead, I became the family secret, the burden they hid from polite company. While Caroline's biological children, Megan, James, and Sarah, enjoyed private schools, designer clothes, and family vacations, I wore thrift store hand-me-downs and was often locked in my room when guests came over because I was an embarrassment. Caroline had perfected the art of emotional cruelty without ever laying a hand on me. She told me daily that I was the reason my mother died, that my birth had killed her sister. She said my father left because I was a mistake he couldn't bear to look at. The worst part wasn't the cruel words or the isolation, it was watching Caroline post on social media about what a wonderful, sacrificial aunt she was. Pictures of family dinners where I wasn't allowed to sit at the table, photos of Christmas mornings where I watched from the kitchen as her children opened gifts I could only dream of, videos of her accepting community awards for her generous spirit in raising her poor orphan niece. I kept a diary during those years, written in a simple code I'd developed. It was the only way I could process what was happening to me. Entry after entry documented the systematic emotional abuse, the financial deprivation, and most importantly, the growing realization that the money meant for me was funding Caroline's increasingly lavish lifestyle. I wrote about the casino trips she took while claiming there was no money for my school supplies. I documented the home renovations and expensive jewelry purchases that coincided with her receiving my benefit checks. When I turned 18, Caroline informed me that the college fund she'd supposedly been saving for me was empty due to unexpected expenses. She suggested I get a job instead of pursuing higher education, claiming that people like us don't go to college. That night, I applied for every scholarship I could find. When I received a full academic scholarship to a prestigious university, Caroline's response wasn't pride or celebration. It was anger that I was abandoning the family and being ungrateful. I left for college with nothing but my clothes and my diary. For 8 years, I threw myself into my studies, working multiple jobs to support myself while earning my bachelor's degree and then my law degree. I graduated summa cum laude and passed the bar exam on my first try. Every achievement felt like a small victory against Caroline's voice in my head telling me I was worthless. After law school, I joined a firm specializing in family law and financial exploitation cases. It was during my research on guardian abuse that I discovered just how extensive Caroline's fraud had been. Using my legal access to databases, I uncovered the full scope of the funds she had received in my name. Not only had she misappropriated my benefits, but she had also used my social security number to open credit lines and take out loans, effectively stealing my identity for her financial gain. The breaking point came when I learned that Caroline was telling people I had become successful despite her best efforts, and was now too good to maintain contact with the family that had sacrificed so much for me. She was even using my professional success as social media content, posting about how proud she was of the daughter she raised, while simultaneously demanding that I pay her back for the expenses of my childhood. That's when I decided enough was enough. Caroline wanted to talk about expenses? Fine, we would discuss every penny in a court of law. Filing the lawsuit was both terrifying and liberating. My legal partner, Elena Rodriguez, had become not just a colleague but a trusted friend who understood the complexity of family trauma. She helped me prepare what would become an airtight case against Caroline, documenting not just the financial fraud but the emotional abuse that had enabled it. Caroline's response to being served was exactly what I expected. She immediately filed a countersuit demanding $30,000 in reimbursement for the costs of raising me. She prepared itemized bills for everything from food to clothing to housing, conveniently leaving out the fact that she had received nearly 10 times that amount specifically for those expenses. The day of the trial, I sat in the courthouse wearing my best suit, feeling a mixture of terror and anticipation. Caroline arrived looking every inch the wronged party, carrying her fabricated receipts and wearing an expression of righteous indignation. She had clearly expected this to be a simple matter of an ungrateful child being put in her place. Judge Thompson was a stern man with sharp eyes who had clearly seen his share of family disputes. When Caroline presented her bills, he examined them carefully before asking pointed questions about the government assistance she had received. I watched her face pale as she realized he wasn't going to simply accept her version of events. Elena's opening statement was devastating in its clarity. She methodically presented the evidence of Caroline's financial fraud, contrasting the lavish lifestyle Caroline had funded with my benefits against the documented neglect I had suffered. When she read excerpts from my childhood diary, I saw several jurors visibly moved by the stark accounts of emotional abuse. Today I was told I killed my mother by being born. Elena read from an entry I had written at age 10. Aunt Caroline bought herself a diamond bracelet. She said there wasn't enough money for my school lunch account this month. Caroline's lawyer tried to object, claiming the diary entries were fabricated, but Judge Thompson overruled him. The entries correlated too perfectly with bank records and witness statements to be anything but authentic. The prosecution's star witness was Mr. Miller, our elderly neighbor who had lived next door during my childhood. I had been nervous about whether he would remember enough to be helpful, but his testimony was devastatingly specific. He recalled multiple occasions when he had seen me eating scraps in the backyard while Caroline's family dined inside. He remembered the Christmas Eve when he found me locked out of the house in the cold because Caroline was hosting a party and didn't want me embarrassing her in front of guests. That child was skin and bones, Mr. Miller testified, his voice shaking with emotion. I offered to help many times, but Mrs. Blackwood always said the girl was difficult and that she was handling it. Looking back, I should have called someone. I should have done more. Caroline's defense crumbled quickly under cross-examination. When asked about specific expenditures, she couldn't explain why she had been taking trips to Las Vegas and Atlantic City during periods when she claimed to be struggling financially to care for me. Bank records showed massive cash withdrawals that coincided with her gambling trips, all funded by money that was supposed to be providing for my basic needs. The moment I had been waiting for came when Caroline took the stand in her own defense. Under Elena's methodical questioning, her carefully constructed facade began to crack. When asked about the college fund, she snapped that I was ungrateful and that she had done her best with a difficult child. "Did you tell Amy she was responsible for her mother's death?" Elena asked. She needed to understand the reality of the situation. Caroline replied coldly. What reality was that? That she was a burden, a mistake that cost my sister her life. The courtroom fell silent. Even Caroline seemed to realize she had gone too far, but the damage was done. Judge Thompson's expression had turned to ice. When it came time for my testimony, I felt strangely calm. I had spent so many years afraid of Caroline, but sitting in that courtroom, I realized she had no power over me anymore. I spoke clearly about the emotional abuse, the financial deprivation, and the systematic way Caroline had stolen not just money, but my childhood and my sense of self-worth. "Your Honor," I said, looking directly at Caroline, "I don't want revenge. I want accountability. I want recognition that what happened to me was wrong, and I want to ensure it doesn't happen to other children." Judge Thompson's ruling was swift and decisive. Not only did he dismiss Caroline's countersuit, but he ordered a full investigation into her financial affairs and referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. He found that Caroline had violated her fiduciary duty as my guardian and had committed systematic financial fraud. "Mrs. Blackwood," Judge Thompson said, his voice cutting through the courtroom, "you received nearly $300,000 to care for your niece. Instead, you used that money to fund a lifestyle of luxury while subjecting her to emotional abuse and neglect. This court finds your actions unconscionable and potentially criminal." Caroline's reaction was explosive. She stood up screaming that I had destroyed the family and that she deserved compensation for her sacrifice. Security had to escort her from the courtroom as she continued her tirade. But perhaps the most surprising outcome was the reaction of Caroline's children. After the trial, as I sat in the parking lot trying to process what had just happened, Sarah approached my car. She was 21 now, a young woman I barely knew but who shared my features and my dark hair. "Amy," she said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "I remember more than I thought I did. The locked doors, the separate meals, the way Mom always told us you were difficult and we should stay away from you. I was young, but I should have questioned it. I should have spoken up." Sarah explained that after my testimony, she and her siblings had confronted Caroline and discovered the full extent of the fraud. Hidden in Caroline's bedroom were documents showing she had not only misappropriated my benefits, but had also used my identity to secure loans and credit cards. The family's comfortable lifestyle had been built on money stolen from an orphan child. Megan and James want to make this right. Sarah continued. We can't give you back your childhood, but we can start by returning what was stolen from you. We've been living off your money our entire lives. Over the following weeks, I met with all three of Caroline's children. Megan, now 30, was devastated to learn that her private school education and her wedding had been funded by money meant for me. James, 28, realized that his college tuition and his car had been purchased with my benefits. They insisted on liquidating assets and returning every penny they could to me. This was never ours. Megan said as she handed me a cashier's check. We profited from your suffering, and we have to make that right. The criminal investigation moved forward swiftly. Caroline was arrested on charges of fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. The sight of her being led away in handcuffs was something I thought would feel more satisfying than it did. Instead, I felt only a deep sadness for all the years lost to her cruelty. During the months that followed, as Caroline's case worked its way through the criminal courts, I focused on rebuilding relationships with my cousins and processing my own trauma. Sarah became particularly close to me, and through our growing friendship, I began to understand what family could actually feel like when it wasn't based on manipulation and exploitation. The most meaningful moment came when Sarah asked about my work protecting other victims of guardian abuse. How can we help? She asked. We want to do something meaningful with this experience. Together, we established a foundation to help children aging out of problematic guardianship situations. We provided legal assistance, educational support, and most importantly, advocacy to ensure that the money meant to help these children actually reach them. It felt like the best possible use of the money Caroline had stolen, turning it into protection for other vulnerable children. Caroline was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and identity theft. At her sentencing hearing, I chose to make a victim impact statement. I looked at her directly as I spoke, no longer the frightened child she had tormented. You stole my childhood, my sense of safety, and my trust in family, I said, but you didn't steal my future. Despite everything you did to break me down, I became exactly the person you told me I could never be. I'm successful, educated, and most importantly, I'm surrounded by people who actually love me. I've learned what real family looks like, and it has nothing to do with shared blood, and everything to do with mutual respect and genuine care. Caroline stared at me with the same cold hatred I remembered from childhood, but it no longer had any power over me. She was just a bitter woman facing the consequences of her choices. Today, 3 years after that first trial, I run a successful law practice specializing in guardian abuse cases. I've helped dozens of children recover stolen funds and escape exploitative situations. My cousins and I have become genuinely close, building the kind of family relationships I never thought possible. Sarah recently graduated from law school and joined my practice. I want to fight for kids like you were, she told me. I want to make sure what our mother did never happens to anyone else. Sometimes people ask me if I forgive Caroline. The truth is, forgiveness isn't something I think about much anymore. She's simply irrelevant to my life now. I've built something beautiful from the ashes of my childhood trauma, and that matters more to me than holding on to anger. The little girl who once wrote coded diary entries about her pain grew up to become a woman who fights for justice. The child who was told she was worthless became an advocate for the most vulnerable. The scared 8-year-old who lost everything learned to create a life filled with purpose and genuine love. Caroline thought she was teaching me that I was nothing. Instead, she taught me exactly who I didn't want to be, and in the end, that lesson was worth everything. As I write this, I'm sitting in my office, surrounded by photos of the children I've helped and the family I've chosen. On my desk is that old diary, its coded entries now part of legal precedent in guardian abuse cases. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with your pain is transform it into protection for others. The scared little girl is gone. In her place stands a woman who knows her worth, protects her boundaries, and uses her voice to defend those who can't yet defend themselves. Caroline may have taken my childhood, but she gave me something else entirely, the absolute determination to ensure no child would ever suffer in silence the way I did. And that, I suppose, is its own kind of justice.